Hi, folks. So, DevOps Digest recently published an article that I wrote, and I wanted to make a video going over it because, well, who reads these days? So, the title of this article is IDEs are becoming debuggers. And the main point of the article is that in a world where we are using agentic software engineers more and more, IDEs need to change. They need to be something very different. Now, IDEs as we know them were or are a very code-first experience. The whole idea is that it's meant for a human programmer manually typing in code, artisanal, handcrafted commits. But now all those assumptions are changing with agentic coding tools, whether it is a CLI tool like Claude Code or their web counterparts. We're moving to an intent first, code second model. You always start with the coding agent, and only when something goes wrong with the coding agent, the functionality didn't work or it didn't quite follow instructions or you want to make some small changes, that is when you fire up your IDE. And the analogy I was trying to make is that before AI, the programmer would spend almost all their time in the IDE, and then once in a blue moon, hopefully, if things didn't work, you would fire up a debugger. So that's what's happening now. IDEs are becoming debuggers because you only fire them up when your coding agent doesn't work like you want it to. And anecdotally, there's a lot of people on Twitter talking about this, people like Armin Ronasher, where they go very long times, they go for weeks or months between firing up the IDs. And I've seen this with my own programming too. So I'm coining this new metric, time between IDE sessions. This is a metric to measure the progress of coding agents. All right, so that is kind of the philosophical background. What I really wanted to talk about was, well, if you were to make an AI first quote unquote IDE, what would that look like if you wanted to design that tabula rasa today? And so this is my wish list. Obviously, it would have to be chat and NATLANG first. The input would be intent or constraints of feedback to the agent, all in natural language. And you might say that, the coding agent integrations like Copilot or Claude Code extensions in VS Code do this. But I still feel that's a very fractured experience. There's a pane for Copilot or Claude Code off to the side, and then there's still your main editor with the code in it. And these almost seem like two very different experiences jammed together into one UI. All right, so the next thing on my wish list is what I'm calling structure and scaffolding for this conversation between the programmer and the agent. And what I mean is that if you look at the conversation you have with your coding agent, it is still a big wall of text. And it's very hard to discern the structure of that conversation itself. For example, you'll almost always start with a plan, and then there will be work performed for each step in the plan. But these things are not structured, they aren't linked. A good analogy is if you look at the way, for example, a good IDE shows you the results of running all your unit tests. It doesn't just show you a wall of text with the output of each test. It shows you a hierarchical, structured UI element where you can see an overall view, list view of which tests passed, which didn't, and then you can click through on each test to see if it failed, where it failed, and you can see a backtrace. So there's some structure to the way you look at that output. And I'm asking for some similar structure to this completely free-form wall of text conversation, which can be really long and becomes very hard to parse and keep track of. This next point is actually very related to structure and scaffolding, and that's progressive disclosure. So as my conversations get longer and longer, I want to be able to drill in and out at various levels of detail in that conversation. I want to first see a very high level summary of what the agent did. And then maybe if I'm interested, I can click through and drill down into more details. and maybe see the detailed work that was performed for, say, a given step in a plan. And if I'm really feeling like it, I can go all the way down to the full manual coding IDE experience, which shows me the raw code. And then my last point on the wish list is for better version control. What I mean by this is that if you look at version control systems today, mostly Git, that's the kind of default version control system. Its goal is to give some semantic understanding to human programmers for how the project evolved over time. And if you've done your commits properly, each commit is a logical atomic unit of functionality, and your repository is consistent at each commit in that it's not broken after each commit. But this model is now extremely low level because just looking at the commits doesn't give you the full picture of a project where you are using AI to build out a ton of functionality. You need some notion of also version controlling the artifacts and abstractions and interactions that you're having with an agent. It's almost like the code is actually an output of all your interactions with the agent, and all those interactions are lost. They are not in version control. So if you really want to retrace the how or the why behind why the code looks like it does, you need some way to capture the artifacts that your agent made or the interactions that you had with your agent. This is similar to the debate many folks have had about checking in generated code. We're not exactly there yet, but people will often argue that you shouldn't check in generated code, or even if you do check in generated code, it's more important to check in the thing that generated that code. So this is a similar argument for AI agents. All right, so I'll leave a link to this article in the description below. Go read the full thing if you're interested. If you like content like this, like the video, consider subscribing, and I will see you next time. Thanks.